Hey everyone, this is Will at Third and Long. What we're going to be looking at today is our Fanduel and 247 predicted win totals for the 2024 college football season for the Big 12. So we've already done the ACC, SEC, and the Big 10. You can look at my videos below and click on those if you want to watch that. But we're going to be focusing on the Big 12 predictions for the 2024 college football season today. And what we're going to do is we are going to work from the lowest predicted win totals up to the teams that FanDuel predicts are going to lead the Big 12 conference. There's been a complete overhaul of the Big 12 conference, obviously, going into this season. They lost Texas, they lost Oklahoma, but they are welcoming in Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado. So it's a completely new look conference, but let's go ahead and get things started. Hit that like button and subscribe. If you have any comments, drop them below and I will make sure to respond. So the first team that we're going to be looking at is the Houston Cougars. So Houston did fire head coach Dana Holgorsen this offseason. So they also have a complete change. They lost a lot of their team from last year. They only have one starter coming back on the offensive line. Last year, they only averaged 23 points per game, a completely uncharacteristic season from Dana Holgorsen. Their defense gave up 31 points per game. So this was not a good team at all. They couldn't score. They couldn't stop teams from scoring. But they are bringing in Willie Fritz right now as the head coach. He's a very accomplished head coach. He's going to be running a 50-50 style of offense, passing the ball 50% of the game, running the ball 50%. So a little different than the air raid offense that Holgorsen was running, but he does have to completely rebuild this team. And even though the Big 12 is not a really tough conference, there's a lot of decent 500 teams because they really do not have an easy schedule. But FanDuel and 247, they were predicting Houston to come into this season with 4.5 wins for the regular season. Let's take a look at their schedule and let's go game by game and see what we predict the Cougars to do. They are kicking things off with UNLV on August 31st. They actually won 9 games last year. This is a really good team. So do not overlook the University of Las Vegas. I'm actually going to go with the upset here. So I have them beating the Power 5 Houston Cougars. So I have Houston starting out 0-1. Not because Willie Fritz can't coach, but it's going to take a while for everything to set in, probably around year 2 for this Cougars team. They are bringing back Smith at quarterback. So he had some pretty good games last year, had some pretty bad games, but they start out 0-1. Then they have Oklahoma. That's a loss. Rice, they'll win that. Cincinnati, they'll win that. Iowa State, always really competitive. They always have a good defense. I have them losing that. I have them losing to, it's just a gauntlet here. I have them losing to TCU, losing to Kansas, losing to Utah, losing to Kansas State, losing to Arizona. Baylor, that's a toss-up game right there. I have them beating Baylor, and let's say they beat BYU. So I have them finishing 4-8, which is the exact same record that they finished the 2023 college football season with also. The next team that we're going to look at is the other Cougars team, the BYU Cougars. So BYU, last year they finished 5-7. FanDuel and 247 have the Cougars coming in also with 4.5 wins. Looking at their schedule, this is a team that always starts out the year pretty decent, but then they completely fall apart the last portion of the season. But let's go game by game and see what we predict they're going to do for the 2024 season. On August 31st, they start things out with Southern Illinois. That should obviously be a win. Then they play SMU. SMU is a really good team led by Rhett Lashley. They have Stone back at quarterback. There's going to be a pretty competitive team, and they are also a new addition to the ACC. I have BYU losing that. Wyoming, always a competitive, tough team. This is a 50-50 game, but I have Wyoming getting the win there. I have them losing to Kansas State. We'll go with them beating Baylor. So as of right now, they have 2 wins. They'll lose to Arizona. Oklahoma State, that's always a really close game. Let's say they lose to Oklahoma State. UCF is going to be really good this season. I have them losing to them. Utah loss, Kansas loss. They'll beat Arizona State. And that Houston game's a 50-50. I have them, let's say they beat either Houston or getting an upset there versus Wyoming. I have the BYU Cougars coming in at 4-8, so just under the 4.5 win prediction. but yet not as good as last season, but it's not an easy schedule. Even though the Big 12 doesn't have any great teams per se, they do have a lot of really competitive 500-ish teams. The next state we're going to look at is Arizona State, who's just had a really bad run of seasons. They finished last year 3-9. Fanduel and 247 have them going with 4.5 wins. A lot of 4.5 win predictions so far. So far, we've had 2 of them. We have both of those teams finishing 4-8. So let's look at the Sun Devils here. On August 31st, they kick things off. Another Wyoming game. Wyoming always competitive, so I have Wyoming winning that one. Then Mississippi State. This is kind of an interesting game here because obviously they have a new coach. They have a new offensive philosophy. I have Mississippi State getting the out-of-conference win. Texas State, they'll win that. Texas Tech loss. Kansas loss. Utah loss. Cincinnati. I'll have Cincinnati getting the win there. I have Oklahoma State getting the win, UCF getting the win, Kansas State getting a win. I have, oh my God, this is awful. So just a horrible stretch of games, really competitive games. So obviously they're going to beat either Cincinnati or Texas Tech. They're going to split one of those, and then they'll have BYU, Arizona. To me, those are both going to be losses. I have Arizona State going 2-10. I just don't see how they get to 4.5 wins. I don't know why Vegas has them hovering 4 to 5 wins. This was a 3-9 win team last season. I don't see the schedule for them to have any improvements this season. UCF should be better. Cincinnati had a really good run game last year. They were not very good, but they'll be able to run the ball. At most, this is a 4-win team. The next team that we're going to look at is Deion Sanders, Colorado Buffaloes, one of the new teams coming in here from the Pac-12, just like Arizona State. This is a team that obviously had a complete overhaul last year. What they brought in, like 65 transfer players, completely changed the roster over. They still have Shedeur Sanders. They still have Travis Hunter. Deion Sanders does not recruit at all in any way whatsoever, but he does work the transfer portal very well. They went from 1 win to 4-8 last year. Props to them for that. Can Deion Sanders continue that success, continue moving forward in a new conference? Vegas has them getting 5.5 wins. This is going to be tough on Sanders because his son's going to leave after this season. He's going to have to rebuild the offense. They had a bottom 5 defense last year, completely pathetic. They had a lot of issues on the coaching staff. Deion Sanders caused a lot of those issues. Let's just be honest, did not handle them well publicly, but it doesn't matter now. New season, can he get to a bowl game? That would be an accomplishment. But if he doesn't, and he loses his son to the NFL draft, they have to now rebuild, and they still haven't made a bowl. So they could start sliding backwards. He needs to make the most of this season. Let's look at their schedule. They kick things off with North Dakota. That's a tough game, but I have them getting that. Nebraska, that was a good game last season. Nebraska under Matt Rule is going to be really good this season, a lot better than they were last year. They do have a top 25 defense. I have Nebraska getting the win. Colorado State, crazy game last season. It was like a double overtime game. I have Colorado again winning that. Baylor, Baylor's just going backwards. I have Colorado getting the win, so now they're 3-1. UCF, I have UCF winning. I have Kansas State winning. Arizona winning. I have Colorado beating Cincinnati, so they'll have 4 wins. Texas Tech's one of those teams that could be really good. They could also be really bad. I'm going to go with Colorado, either splitting the Texas Tech or the Arizona game. So that would give them, 1, 2, 3. That'd be their 4th win. Utah, they're going to be tough. That's a loss. Kansas State loss, Oklahoma State, they'll win that. So does that put them at 5 wins right there? Let's take a look. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, man, so I'm coming in with Colorado coming in 5-7. There's a slight chance they get to 6-6, get to 500. This is a team that will be able to score, but their run game was like 125th last year, and their defense was 127 or so. Just awful. How much can they improve that solely through the transfer portal? That's the big question. The next team that we're going to be looking at is the Cincinnati Bearcats. They also went 3-9 last season. Vegas has them making a jump forward, so getting 5.5 wins, so hovering between that 5 to 6 win total. This is a team that could really run the ball last season. I think they were averaging like 228 rush yards per game. Had a pretty decent season on the ground. Outside of that, completely awful. Could not throw the ball and their defense was non-existent. But what can they do in the post-Luke Fickell seasons? Let's take a look at their schedule. Starting things off with Townsend, that's a win. Pitt, that's a game that could easily go 50-50. Pitt's been sliding back under Pat Narduzzi the last season, but I'll go with Pitt getting the win still. I'll go with them beating Miami of Ohio, which that's not a given because they always actually have a pretty good defense, and they have a very good rush defense. But I'll go with Cincinnati getting the win as of now. Houston, that's a toss-up game, but I'll have them losing that. I will have them losing to Texas Tech, losing to UCF. Arizona State, let's just say they win that. So they have 3 wins. Colorado, that's a game. We'll give Colorado that win. West Virginia will win that. Iowa State win. Kansas State win. TCU win. So I have Cincinnati again going 3-9. I think this is a 4-8 team. So 3 to 4 wins. I don't have them getting 5.5 wins. So I don't have them getting to that bowl game. But they could easily get some wins here. So the Townsend, Miami, they could beat Houston technically because they're rebuilding. They could beat Arizona State. They could beat Colorado, and they could get an upset there those last 3 games, and that would get them to 6 wins. So they do have the possibility to get there. It's just a lot of things have to fall their way. The next team that we're looking at is the Baylor Bears. They also went 3-9 last season. Fanduel 247 had them going 5.5 wins. So also that 5 to 6 win total, potentially making a bowl game. Dave Aranda's team's completely fallen apart since they competed for the Big 12. Was that two years ago? They're completely gone backwards. If they don't make a bowl game this season, he is definitely getting fired. This is a team in their recruiting ground. They should be a lot better. This is not the Matt Rule, Art Briles Baylor days, but they can get back to that. They're in fertile recruiting ground. This is the team that should be led by their offense, but they're just not being, and they also don't have a good defense, which is Dave Aranda's specialty. So let's look at their win total. I have them getting a win versus TAR. Utah, that's obviously a tough game. Air Force, that's a team that was really good last season. They should be taking a step back this season. Let's go with, but that's a game that Baylor could easily lose, but I'll go with Baylor getting the win. Colorado lost, so they're 2-2. BYU, that's a 50-50 game. I'll go with BYU getting that win, 2-3. Then Iowa State, Iowa State's a good team, like I mentioned before, good defense, but there has to be some upsets. So we'll go with Baylor getting the win there. They're 3-3. Texas Tech loss. Oklahoma State, that's also a game that could go either way. Let's just say that Baylor gets the upset there. So they're 4-3. TCU should be better this year, 4-4. West Virginia's good, 4-5. Houston, let's say they win that, 5-6. Kansas State, they'll lose that. So I have the Baylor Bears going 5-7. Dave Aranda getting fired. But this is a really good potential job for an up and coming coach going forward. The next team that we're going to be looking at is the West Virginia Mountaineers, who came out of nowhere last year. A lot of people had Neil Brown getting fired. He upset everyone. Great season, finished 9-4. This is a team that could potentially get back to their winning ways, back to the old way that they used to be when they were led by Pat White. Really good offense. They had some really fun teams under Rich Rod back in the early 2000s. They could potentially get there with the Big 12 being wiped clean now from the big powerhouse programs. Maybe this is the chance for West Virginia to take their place at the top of the conference. They went 9-4 last season. Vegas has them taking a step back, getting 6.5 wins this season. Let's look at their schedule game by game. Penn State, really tough out-of-conference game there, but props to them for scheduling Penn State. That said, that could be an interesting game because West Virginia is not a slouch. But I'll go with Penn State, led by their defense, getting the win there. Then they have ALB. Obviously, that's a win for West Virginia. Pitt, I'll go with West Virginia getting the win there. That's an old Big East rivalry. Kansas, that's an interesting game here. That's a 50-50 one. Even though Kansas is good, led by a good team, led by good quarterback depth, I'll go with Kansas getting the win. So right now they're 2-2. Oklahoma State, I have West Virginia getting the win. 3-2. Iowa State. Let's go with West Virginia getting the win there. 4-2. Kansas State, they'll lose that. 4-3. Arizona, I could see Arizona, new coach, has to rebuild. Let's say West Virginia beats them. So now they have 5 wins. They'll beat Cincinnati. They'll beat Baylor. UCF, I'll have them splitting the UCF Texas Tech game. So how many wins will that be? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 wins. So right now I have them going 7-5. I think this is a 7-5 to 8-4 team. How they get to 8-4 is a potential upset of one of those other teams, a Kansas or Kansas State. But this can easily be an 8-4 team. And then with the bowl game, they could also get to 9 wins. Again, back-to-back really good seasons. Neil Brown is setting a strong foundation for the seasons going forward. The next team that we're going to be looking at is Sonny Dykes TCU Horned Frogs here. Obviously, this is the team that went to the national championship 2 seasons ago. Took a step back this season, but they lost a lot of massive pieces. They lost Quinton Johnson. They lost their quarterback. They lost their running back. They lost a lot of defensive players. So they were stripped, built through the transfer portal, took a big step back, had a lot of injuries last season at the quarterback position, at the skilled positions, especially on defense. But they lost a lot of really close competitive games, and they actually finished the end of the season pretty strong. Can they carry that success into this season? They're hovering around 30th recruiting. They need to move that up, but this is a team just like Baylor. They have a lot of promise. They can get back to their really good days. They are in the state of Texas. The players are there. Get the high-flying offense going, and they will come back to success. So looking at their 2023 season, they went 5-7. Vegas has them taking a big step forward, finishing this season with 7.5 wins. Let's look at their schedule. Starting things out with Stanford, win. LIU, win. UCF, let's say, so UCF and next SMU. They have a pretty tough stretch there. Let's go with them winning one of those. So they'll have 3 wins. Kansas, loss, so they're 3-2. Houston, 4-2. Utah, loss, 3-3. Sorry, that would be 1, 2, 3. Yeah, so they're 4-3. And then Texas Tech, I'll go with them winning that. That could be a tough game. That's also a 50-50, but that's 5 wins. Baylor, 6. They'll beat Oklahoma State, 7. They'll beat Cincinnati. So I'm going to go with TCU taking a big step forward, going 8-4 the 2024 season. A floor, I'd say 7-5, but I think 8-4 is where they will end up. Worst case scenario, 7-5 though, but still taking steps forward after the 2023 season. Next team that we're going to be taking a look at is the Oklahoma State Cowboys. They finished last year 10-4. They were led by Gordon, who led the nation in rushing. He had just under 1,800 yards, had a whole bunch of touchdowns. He was catching the ball. They had Bowman at quarterback, who really wasn't playing the best quarterback play, but Oklahoma State, they have a serviceable defense. It's not good, but it's serviceable. But the rushing attack kept them in every single game. They were able to control the clock, drain the clock, keep the ball on the ground, get some low-scoring wins. So not the Oklahoma State of old on the offensive side, but a pretty good team, a very competitive team that was competing for the Big 12. Bowman is back at quarterback. Gordon is back at running back. But Vegas has them taking a step back. They have them going with 7.5 wins. Let's take a look at their schedule. They kick things off with SDST. I have them getting, so with South Dakota State, I have them getting, that's also not a given win, but I have them getting the win. Arkansas, completely retooled, rebuilt Arkansas. That's a 50-50 one right there. But Arkansas, they're not very good. I have Oklahoma led by Ollie Gordon, being able to run the ball on Arkansas, get the win. I have them beating Tulsa, so looking pretty good right now, 3-0. They'll probably be ranked around number 23 at this point. And then Utah, I have them out-physicaling them, getting the win. Kansas State getting the win. West Virginia win. They'll beat BYU. They'll beat Baylor. They'll beat Arizona State. TCU, let's say that's a loss. So they're going to win either, let's see how many wins you have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They have 6 wins right now. I have them winning 2 out of these 3 last games. So TCU, Texas Tech, or Colorado. They can lose. They could easily win 1 or 2 of those. I'll go with them losing to TCU, beating Texas Tech, and beating Colorado. So that puts them at 8-4, but I have this as a 7-5 team in my head. So they're going to be in that 7 to 8 wins. So basically, I completely agree with Vegas going right down the middle, 7.5 wins. Next team we'll be looking at is Iowa State. This is a team that's always really competitive, always gets into the top 25, falls out. Coach probably should have taken his chance and left this program, but nonetheless, he's been loyal. He has built a very consistent, tough team. They're never a team that gets blown out. Always really physical, always a really good defense. He gets the most out of the talent that he has. And Brock Purdy in the NFL is also making him look pretty good right now. They went 7-6 last season. Vegas has them going with 7.5 wins. Like we said, the Big 12, although not a great conference, not a powerhouse conference, a really competitive conference. A lot of teams are around 500 or just over 500. So no game is a given. That's what makes these schedules so tough for the Big 12 conference. But looking at their schedule, they have UND, win, Iowa. Gosh, that anything can happen there because Iowa's offense is so pathetic. But let's go with Iowa getting the win. Arkansas State, Iowa State will get the win. Houston, win. Baylor, win. West Virginia, that's a tough one. Let's go with West Virginia getting the win, so they're 4-2. UCF, that'll be a loss. 4-3. Texas Tech, let's say they win that. 5-3. Kansas, loss. 5-4. Cincinnati wins. 6-4. Utah, that's a loss. And Kansas State, that's a loss. Well, I'll have them splitting. Nope, I have them getting the upset versus Utah, losing. Now, let's swap that. Getting the win versus Utah, losing. Getting the loss versus Utah, getting the win versus Kansas State. So I have Iowa State, again, going 7-5. Still a really good season considering the level of talent that they have on their team, but they're always a well-coached, competitive football team. So 7-5, around right where Vegas has them. The next team is a team that I've been saying the whole time is going to be a really good team this season. That's the UCF Knights. Last season, they went 6-7. Obviously, they were way better than a 6-7 ball club, but they were beat up last year. Quarterback John Fleming had a really good season, but he was lost for, 3 or 4 games, beat up, hurt his leg. But when he was playing, they were playing really well. They could score. They could score really fast. This team has a lot of talent, a lot of speed, going to be one of the best teams in the Big 12 this season. They went 6-7 last year. Vegas has them jumping forward with 9.5 wins. So almost getting to 10 wins. Let's take a look at their schedule and see what we think they're going to do. They start things out with the University of New Hampshire, win. SHSU, that's a win. TCU, win. Colorado, win. Florida, an in-state game. A lot on the line here. This is a team, they have a head coach. He's been there before. That's a win. Right now, they're 5-0. Props to UCF. They'll definitely be ranked. Then they have Iowa State. I have Iowa State. That's a game that could go either way. Let's say UCF wins it. BYU win. There has to be an upset in there someplace. You're just not going to run the table. Let's say they lose to Arizona, beat Arizona State. Then they... West Virginia. That's a tough one. They beat West Virginia, and they lose to Utah. Utah is going to be really physical, really good defense, out for blood in their new conference. They're mad at the Pac-12. They didn't want to be in the Big 12. So they're going to be looking to stomp these teams. I have UCF having a really good season, 10-2. Just think of it. If UCF goes 10-2, there's the outside potential they could actually make the playoffs. That's crazy, especially with the SEC win over Florida. This is a really good team, and they added KJ Jefferson at the quarterback position through the transfer portal. So UCF taking big steps forward this year. The next team that we're going to be looking at is the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Last season they went 7-6, but this was a 9 or 10 win team last year. Had a really lot of close losses, had a lot of injuries, had quarterbacks going into the transfer portal. They have good coaching by McGuire. This is a team that's better than their record shows. 7-6 last season. Vegas has them going forward with 8.5 wins. They start things out on August 31st with ACU, win Washington State, win University of North Texas, win Arizona State, win. So right now they're 4-0. Cincinnati, win 5-0. But there's going to be some upsets in there, obviously. So when you get into Arizona, let's say Arizona wins that. Baylor, Texas Tech will win, so they're 6-1. TCU will have TCU getting a win there. So how many wins is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Iowa State, let's say they lose that. They'll beat Colorado. They'll beat Oklahoma State. And West Virginia, they will lose that one. So I have Texas Tech going 8-4, getting things back on track, getting back to a bowl game, and then potentially getting back to having a 9-win season. Next team that we're going to be looking at is Kansas State. They went 9-4 last season, a really well-coached team. Vegas has them going with 8.5 wins. The fact they won 9 games last season and they were down to their third string quarterback at one point is completely crazy. Lost their first string, played with the second string the whole season. He went down for 2 games. They had their third string in there and they continued to win. This team can run the ball really well. They play sound defense. Let's look at their schedule. They start things off with LIN, win, Illinois, win, UNLV. I said before, they're not a pushover, but Kansas is the better team. That's a win. West Virginia, let's say they lose that. TCU, win, Arizona State, win. Right now they're 5-1. Houston, win. The big rivalry versus Kansas State. That's going to be a tough one there. I will have them losing that. So how many wins is that right now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wins. Iowa State, win. 6, BYU, win. Colorado, win. Baylor, win. Crazy. I have them going 9-3. I think at the floor, this is an 8-4 team. Peak, the best they could do is 10-2, but I don't really see that happening. I have them going 9-3. That's a really good season. They could potentially get back to the Big 12 championship, possibly get 10 wins there, possibly get a 11th win in their bowl game. But if they lose the Big 12, then obviously they could still get to 10 wins through a bowl win. The next team that we're looking at is Arizona. They were one of these surprise teams last season. Had a really strong year and a really deep competitive Pac-12 conference. They're now coming to the Big 12. They went 10-3 last season. Vegas has them going 8-5, but they lost some guys. They lost their head coach Fish to Washington, so he's gone. They have a new coaching staff. They still have Fafita at quarterback, so they still have the needed playmakers. They have weapons at running back, wide receiver. They had a top 35 defense last season, but can they get back to the level that they were playing at last season under a new head coaching staff? I feel really bad for Arizona because they were coming up, dominated the Pac-12 the last season, coming into a new conference, being led by a really good head coach, but they lost everything because obviously Saban retired, so DeBoer went there, Fish went to Washington, so they were just kind of left out to dry, but hopefully they can pick things up where they left off. Let's take a look at their schedule. Starting things out with New Mexico, win, NAU, win, Kansas State, loss, Utah has to get upset somewhere, but they're 3-0 right now. Let's say they lose to Utah. They lose to Utah. Texas Tech, they'll lose that 3-2. Beat BYU, beat Colorado. West Virginia, that could go either way. Let's say they lose to UCF, beat Houston, lose to TCU, beat Arizona State. So let me look here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I have Arizona going 8-4 with the potential to get to a bowl game and get their 9th win. That's not the best case scenario because had they had Fish there, this is probably a 9 or 10 win team. But with the new head coaching staff kind of changing the way they play, 8-4 with the potential to get that 9 win through their bowl game. Next team that we're looking at is Kansas State, who's obviously been a top 20 team for the last 3 or 4 seasons. Really well-coached team. They do work the portal well. They lost Will Howard to Ohio State. Doesn't matter. They have a 4-star quarterback coming right in, played really well last year. They should be able to pick things up where they left off. This is not a team that's reliant on great quarterback play. They went 9-4 last season. Vegas has them picking things up right where they left off, getting 9.5 wins. Looking at their schedule, UTM, win. Tulane, win. Arizona, win. BYU, win. Oklahoma State, win. And Colorado, win. So right now they're sitting at 6-0. There's got to be some upsets in here. So let's say West Virginia just gets an upset win. Then we have Kansas State. That's a win. Houston, win. Arizona State, win. Cincinnati, win. Iowa State, win. But let's go with, so Iowa State's going to get the upset win there. So I have Kansas State going 10-2, just like UCF. That's the potential to potentially get into the college football playoff, going 10-2 in a power conference team. I have them going 10-2. 9-3 should be the floor for this team. Obviously, they could compete to get the Big 12 championship and get that bye week. But it is crazy that they completely avoid Utah in the regular season, but they could end up obviously having to face them in the Big 12 championship. And that takes us to our final team that we're going to be looking at, and that's the Utah Utes. Vegas also has Utah coming in with 9.5 wins. They finished last year 8-5, but they were completely banged up, lost their safety, their linebackers, lost their quarterback Cam Rising. Cam Rising's coming back for his 15th year of college football. The guy's about 35 years old. He is back. He will be leading this team. Quarterback play held this team back last season from being a 10-win team. That will not be a problem this year. They have a good tight end, and they're always going to have a top 20 really physical defense. Kyle Whittingham is one of the most underappreciated head coaches in college football. But like we said, Vegas has them at 9.5 wins. Let's take a look at their schedule. They're going to get a lot of wins here. So SUU, win. Baylor, win. Utah State, win. Oklahoma State, win. Arizona, win. Arizona State, win. It's just, there's going to be an upset here. It's just trying to find one. I have them technically beating Arizona State, beating TCU, beating Houston, beating BYU, beating Colorado, beating Iowa State, beating UCF. But that puts them at 12-0. And that's just not going to happen. So the upset wins, if there's going to be one, I could see it being, there's always the possibility that Oklahoma State with Gordon could run the ball, control the game, but Utah is very physical. They want you to run it on them so they can shut that down. Arizona has the potential to be the upset there. TCU, potential. Iowa State. This is not a tough schedule at all. So if I'm going to pick an upset, I'm going to go with either Arizona or Iowa State. So that's going to put Utah at 11-1. And I feel crazy saying that. I know there's going to be another upset in there. So if I had to put money, I'd probably say they're going to finish 10-2. I'm having a problem finding where the upsets are because this is pretty much a garbage schedule. Let's be honest. It's not a tough schedule at all. But I'm going to go with 10-2, but they could easily go 11-1 just based off of how easy their schedule is. They're really not playing anyone that's preseason ranked, I don't think. None of them. Yeah. So the potential's there. Maybe Arizona State. Maybe UCF. Maybe that's where their first or their second loss will be. But Utah is going to have a really good season and probably win the Big 12. So that's my breakdown of the Big 12 247 FanDuel predictions. Hit that like button and subscribe. If you have any comments, drop them below, and I'll make sure to respond. Thanks.